Good morning. My name is Susan Sekaquaptewa. I work for Hopi Tribal Cooperative Extension. Today is March 28th, 2021, and we are offering a workshop on seed starting part one. All the information that we're sharing today is how I learned and how I continue to practice my seed starting. And we grow in northern Arizona on the Hopi Reservation. That's growing zone about 7, but we have a lot of other people who will be joining us. I know who grow also, so we're going to tap some of their information as we go forward. So seed starting, yay! It is starting to warm up. Can you guys feel it? Even though we had snow like 2 days ago. This is great. So let's talk about what seed starting means. Let's talk. So, there's several different words we can use when we're talking about this. Transplant is a big word and one of the main words. When you do a search on Google, though, you're going to get like organ transplants. So you might want to add vegetable transplants or transplanting for the garden when you're doing searching. Some people call them seedlings. That's the same thing. It's just growing a baby plant from a seed. Or some people use the word starts. So when you hear any one of these words, we're all talking about the same thing. So the definition of a transplant is starting a seed in optimal conditions. We're going to talk about what those conditions are, and then replanting them in another location. Usually for us, it's usually putting them outside in the permanent garden bed. So I'm going to ask, why would you raise transplants? What would be your reasons of why you would do this? So go ahead and just start listing your answers. One big reason is to save money. If you learn to do this, then you don't have to buy them. So saving money is a great reason of why we would raise transplants. We can have more plant diversity. When you are buying them from anywhere, whether it's me or Walmart or Warner's, the only options you have are what they are growing. So when we learn to grow more of our own plants, you can grow whatever you want as long as you can find the seed, right? So yes, you can't find some of these plants in the stores. Some like purple broccoli maybe, or rapini, or golden zucchini. There's some more heirloom or unique plants. We cannot find those in the grocery store. In the transplant store. So we raise these so we can have more vegetable and plant diversity. We want to support quality, organic, heirloom, open pollinated plants connected to your region. Wow, that's a lot in that sentence. Quality means you can decide what quality means, and you're going to only maybe plant those high quality seeds. If you choose only to grow organic, you can select organic based seeds. Heirloom, meaning heirloom is just a fancy word, right, for things that have been handed down to you. So you can continue the heritage of a plant that you've grown in your family for a long time by keeping and continuing to plant them. Open pollinated means this is just what every natural plant does, including our weeds, all the way up to our specialty variety vegetables. Open pollinated means that they have been pollinated through the wild, through the air. And that's how all plants naturally pollinate themselves. And so when we plant open pollinated plants, we continue to offer that opportunity for these plants to grow and thrive. And then connect it to our region. If we plant plants connected and raise them in our region, they develop a memory, and then they become more adapted as we continue to grow them. So that's why we would raise our own transplants. We can minimize the introduction of insects and diseases that come when we purchase outside plants or get outside plants. So you never know the conditions of where they're being raised, and you can control this a little bit more if you, of course, pay more attention to it. But you could purchase a transplant from out somewhere else, bring it into your space, and if that transplant is already carrying some kind of thing like a white fly or some kind of fungus, that could spread. So we can minimize that if we grow our own transplants. We also practice self-sufficiency, right? This whole class is just about growing more food, and this is just a part of growing your own food, is growing your transplants. So increasing your knowledge and experience, you become more self-sufficient. Great for the winter blues. It's been really cold and snowing the last kind of week, but before that it was really warm, and before that it was snowing. So, starting plants inside can help you kind of get excited about the coming season. And of course, everyone mentioned this, we get a great head start to growing the season because some of these we can't plant outside, it's too cold. So we're going to start them inside. So why do I raise transplants? The two biggest reasons for me was money. The first reason was money. My garden was just getting so big that I was spending over $300 easily on buying transplants. And at some point, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. This is just crazy. And so I started to learn how to raise my own transplants. And of course, I get a big head start to the season. I grow outside of the regular growing season. So that was another big reason for me. Chili transplants can be 2 to 3 months old when you purchase them as a transplant in a store. What that means, when you take that plant home and put it in the ground, you're going to get chili, the actual chili fruit, 2 to 3 months earlier than if you were planting that directly in the ground. Because remember, chili is a warm weather crop. It likes heat, so we can't start it as seed until the ground is warm enough for it to survive. But if we start it inside a couple months earlier, then we can put out that baby 2-month-old plant by the time it warms up. That just gives you an idea of that extending the season part. So some of the supplies we need good seed. That's the first thing we always think about is our good seed. We need good seed. So we usually grow very young seeds that were grown last year. If we're in 2021, which we are right now, we're going to look at growing 2020 seeds that were grown last season. They're about a year old, all the way back to 3 years old. That's considered a young seed. Anything older than that, of course, is older, and they might still be okay, but the viability of them starts to decrease the older they get. Remember, seeds are living things. They're living organisms. We'll talk about this a little bit more. So just think about how old is my seed? I should start planting these this year. Otherwise, they're going to age more. Ensure your seeds are stored well. We want to make sure that our seeds, when we say stored well, that they are in a cool place or cold. You actually can keep it cold. It's dark and it's dry. Dry is key. If those seeds get wet, we compromise their ability to produce later on. So when you're getting seeds from other people, you don't know how they were stored. So when you're managing your own seed stock, you have a better sense and control over that. We're going to document our seeds and our plants. Oh, this is the part that nobody likes because it's such a pain. But it's really important when you begin to grow and get better at growing. We always want to put the plant variety name. So I put on my little seed packet here, I have magenta lettuce. So I know this is lettuce, and if I just put lettuce in there, that would be fine. And if I'm just growing for myself, that's fine. I'm just growing a lettuce. But I'm going to put the plant name magenta because this particular variety I'm beginning to learn grows really well in my region. And I want to make sure I remember that name because other lettuces might not grow as well. So we always name that. What year was it grown? This was grown in 2017. So it's already 4 or 5 years old. Who grew it and where you got it from. This was grown by my good friend at Ashoka Gardens, Kim Kostian. She's my mentor and teacher as well. And so she grew these seeds out. So I always want to make sure I know where I got it from because she grows in a slightly cooler environment than we do. So I know they can grow here because she's cooler than I am. She's also a really good gardener, so I know her quality of seed saving, etc. And the date, of course, the seed was grown out. This was grown out in the season of 2017. So if you start to save your own seed or you're looking at seed packets, these are the kinds of things we are going to try and document as well as remember and read. Remember, 1 seed equals 1 plant. I've never said that until 2 years ago. I know some of you may have been growing a long time and others are just starting. So I don't know where you are in that scheme of things. If you're just starting, 1 seed equals 1 plant. So if you have a whole seed packet and you end up growing all of those seeds out, oh gosh, guess what? How many lettuce seeds would I have? I have probably 100 to 150 plants in here. Just because I will have a whole packet of seed doesn't mean I have to grow the whole packet. So one seed will equal one plant. So those are just something quickly to remember. Supplies and potting soil. We're gonna, this can be a whole class probably in itself. But the main things to remember are we always, always, always use new potting soil for starting seeds. We never use old potting soil, a bag that's been sitting outside all year. Maybe you only used half last year and you didn't use it. Throw that out, throw it in your garden. It's already gone and old and it could be contaminated. We also never, never, never reuse potting soil that we already grew in. I know we like to be cheap. I know we like to recycle. This is the one area where you don't want to do that. We are going to take that used potting soil and just dump it into our garden bed, and it'll just deteriorate with everything else. We always use new or ready-made, new mixed potting soil. Remember, we're starting these seeds and we want to give them the best possible chance they have to grow. So let's start with having good potting soil. Any container that's used for growing seeds needs to have holes at the bottom. Anything. You'll always find, whether it's a big pot or a small growing container, they always have holes. This is the 6-packs we talked about. They have little slits at the bottom. What these holes do is they allow water to be wicked up when we water from the bottom, but they also allow for excess water to drain. No plants like, or very few plants like to be in standing water. The vegetable plants we're talking about, because we're growing food, they don't like to be sitting in standing water, and we can actually kill them by having them sit in water, their roots. So you can make your own plants, your DIY plants. I am going to experiment with these little milk containers because we have all this milk being delivered to us through the schools. So I said, hey, I think this will work. You know, it's a waxy container, so it should hold the water and the soil. But when I look at the bottom, there's no holes. So if I'm repurposing, I am going to add holes to the bottom to allow for excess water to drain. These are just, remember, there's nothing wrong with reusing stuff. Just make sure it works for you. So we can reuse the plants, the containers we used last year. Let's say I already used the 6-pack plants to grow something last year, and then I took them out and planted them out in the garden. I can reuse these as long as they're still usable. And I am cheap. I will try and reuse as much as I can until I can't use them anymore. They're plastics. They're not great plastics, so they will last a few years if you take care of them. We just need to make sure we clean with soap and water in here, and we rinse with a water bleach solution. So like, you know, a couple tablespoons of bleach to a gallon of water. We're just going to rinse in here, and that little rinse is going to kill any remaining bacteria or fungi that's in the containers. So you can reuse all those, just make sure they're clean and sterile. Anytime you're reading up on these, you will always hear sterile. You'll hear the word sterile over and over again when looking at seeding. So that's sterile potting soil, that's sterile containers, and good seed. Okay, those are the 3 main things we want to make sure we pay attention to. Okay, some other supplies we need to start working with is space. Plants need UV light, ultraviolet light. They need that. They cannot survive without ultraviolet light. They are, and that's sunlight. We get that naturally through sunlight. I have a tomato plant here that's already a couple months old, and all these little leaves are little solar panels. Any leaf in the whole world are little solar panels. The only way they can survive and get big and grow strong is a big part of that is sunlight. So we need sunlight, either whether from a window, outside, or you can buy special UV bulbs that produce the right amount of ultraviolet lights for plants. Those are special planting bulbs just for gardening and transplants. You can put your plants, once you start them, in a south-facing window. That's the perfect place to put them. However, I will caution you that modern house windows may have UV filters on them that limits the amount of UV light that comes through that window inside. So if you're having problems with putting transplants at south-facing windows and they're still not doing well, there's most likely a UV filter that's in place. my office here, we have a monitor that we can bring to your house to show you how much UV light is coming in to help gauge that for you. So you can make an appointment with us and we'll come out and we'll show you what that looks like. So every time we teach this class on the res, everybody says, oh yeah, that's okay. Our res houses has really cheap windows, which means because it's more expensive to have UV filters put on them. So that's one benefit, right, of our cheap windows. So think about that as well when you're looking at building greenhouses and other things. We need to pay attention to that UV light. They need at least 70% of that UV light to come through that window. So make an appointment. We'll work with you on that. Plants do best with consistent temperatures, somewhat consistent. So big swings really puts a lot of stress. When a plant goes from 30 degrees to 90 degrees in one day, they can handle that better when they're older, but when they're seedlings, let's try and bring that temperature swing down. I know we can't always do that, but just letting you know that's what they prefer. Grow only what you need. We get crazy and excited when we start growing seeds and we're like, oh, I want to just grow all this stuff. And before you know it, this little thing becomes this thing. So just to show you, they multiply very, very fast. And we're going to show you today how we start seeds in something like this. This little thing can become take up a lot of space, and we'll show you in a bit. So what are those optimal conditions exactly? Warm, consistent temperatures, we're really saying anywhere between 45 to 50 degrees to 80. That's 30-degree range, 45 or 50 to 80. If you can keep them in that range, that's great. We can't always do that, but that's something to work toward. Remember, they love sunlight. Artificial UV light is fine as long as we get the right kind of light bulb. We water. This is going to be the hardest part for me to teach, is watering. But just so you know, we water regularly and consistently, and we're going to use warm water if we can. Remember, we're tricking these plants to think it's summertime, but it's not. It's cold. So we're going to do little tricks to help guide them along. We can fertilize at a certain point, but not over fertilize. This is another tricky part that we almost need our whole class on, because that's a little bit of there's a lot more information that we can offer today. Optimal conditions, there's very little wind or air movement when we start growing these. We're really babying these plants. We're getting them to be in this perfect environment so they can grow fast and strong. But it's okay if they get a little bit. It's actually better if you can give them a little bit of air now and then. It strengthens them up. And of course, the biggest factor is our time. Once we start growing transplants, you really can't leave them alone. You're traveling, like if you can't take a week trip when you start transplants, there's just too much time and attention that needs to be paid. So those are just some things to think about. So let's jump to transplants now. Parts of a seed. These are parts of a seed, very, very important when we start thinking about growing them out as transplants. There's a seed coat, there's a seed leaf in there, there's stored food, and there's a small plant. Every seed in our universe has these, and it's just amazing when you stop and put a microscope down on seeds. Seed coat, this is the outer shell, the outer coating of a seed. This is what protects a seed until germination happens. And so when we're seed saving and storing seeds, this is the seed coat, the part that we don't want to damage. This is why we store in a cool, dark, dry place, because a plant will need moisture, heat, water, and soil to germinate. So we do the opposite things when we're storing them. As soon as the seed coat breaks on a seed, we've now compromised the whole interior of the seed. So seed saving and planting seed, we want to make sure we have a seed that has an intact seed coat. This is a bean seed on this side, and this is a corn seed. You can see that there is a baby plant inside each one of these seeds. Seeds are just amazing. They're really like you and me as women. If you're women on the class today, we carry life in our bellies and grow them out, and then we birth them. The same thing happens with these seeds. There's a little baby inside each of these little baby plants, and that's why they're a life-giving organism, and that's why we honor them and respect them so much, because they're already little babies waiting to be born. I mean, this is a very simple version. There's way more detail when we get into science. There's baby roots in here, and there's also a bunch of food inside that seed. So seeds really only, when we plant them and we water them, and the heat, that damages the seed coat. That seed uh, begins to germinate, and it bursts itself, and it produces a root, and then it produces a stem with 2 leaves. All from this point to this point, all that has been inside the seed. And all the food that this little seedling now takes to grow has been in that seed. So they're just really amazing creatures, I mean, life organisms. They're just beautiful. But once a plant starts growing a second set of leaves, then the plant needs help. So these first set of leaves right here that emerge, they're called cotyledons. This is what we're going to look for as we start to learn to transplant. Up to this point, when you get the first cotyledons, that plant has grown and used all the energy from its own self to get that far. The second set of leaves that emerge here is about 1 day, and about 2 days later for beans. They grow so fast. This is what they look like. These are known as their first true leaves. The cotyledon leaves usually don't look like what a bean leaf looks like. The first set of true leaves that mimics what we know of the leaf of that plant. I mean, that's what they look like. And from this point forward, they need help to grow. So we'll get to that in a little more detail, but I just wanted to show you cotyledons. All the food is in here to get to this far. They're just really amazing, amazing organisms. So let's start to grow. Okay, so we are now going to prepare to start our seeds. First of all, we need our seed. I am in this picture. I'm going to show you magenta lettuce. That's our star for today. We need labels. You can see we gave you some wooden labels, or I use wooden labels or popsicle sticks. We also need a marker, a permanent marker, to mark on the labels. You can see I put the name and the date. We need a tray to hold water, because when we water seedlings, we water from the bottom. That's one of the tricks that we're going to teach you. We need potting soil, right? Fresh or newly made or newly purchased, and if possible, warm that potting soil. Remember, our plants think it's summertime, so they do better if we help them think it's summertime. We're tricking them. So we're going to take that potting soil and bring it inside, put it maybe next to a warm radiator or heater, put it in the sunlight. You're going to do all these little tricks to help that plant along. If you left your potting soil in the car and it was 30 degrees last night, you bring that potting soil in from the car and you start making your plants. They will work, but it'll take probably another day or so for that plant to warm up, or that soil to warm up. So let's help it along. When we water, we use warm water. It can just be tap water, but it's not hot, it's not cold, it's warm. Remember, we're helping this plant along. You need your location, someplace that's going to be warm and safe, a space to do your work. That's my kitchen table, because that's the only space we have, and your journal. Very, very important. If you've taken any one of my classes, I'm always telling you, take out your journal, because this is when we're going to start to document what we've grown, when we started it, and and this is going to be your guide for next year. So you see there's potting soil, there's seeds, there's my markers, I already marked them, and I made some little grooves. So we'll show you what we do. Let me talk about the potting soil. This is a recipe that I use, that I've learned from Ashoka Gardens, from Kim Kostin, who taught me a lot of what I know today. Breakfast mix, the recipe is 1 part cinder sand, it's very, very small, and 1 part peat moss. And we're germinating our seeds in something called breakfast mix. The cinder sand, all it does is create space in that potting soil. We want our roots to be able to get down and deep into the actual dirt. That cinder sand helps create that space. Peat moss holds the water. So we need our soil to stay moist while it's germinating. So that's all we use for our breakfast mix. And it's sifted together, and then we moisten it with warm water. And we'll when we sift it together, sometimes it's dry, and the soil we sent to you, if you received any, might be already dried out. So what we're going to do is dump that soil into a bucket or into a I'm going to stop share for a bit. We're dumping it into a bucket and we add water, and then I mix it around. And this is just soil that I worked on earlier today. The 5 finger hole soil test is really just to test how moist it is. So all we want to do is, after we add some water, we don't want it goopy drippy, we just want it moist enough so it almost holds together when we put it into a ball. And the 5 finger test is, I'm just going to poke my fingers into the soil and let it out. And I'm sorry you can't see that, but when I remove my fingers, if the holes stay open when I move my fingers, it's moist enough. We don't want it dry enough to fall back inside of itself, right? So we're just checking to make sure it's moist. It's not goopy, it's not too dry where the holes fall back in. We just wet it enough and poke holes, and the holes stay open, we're good. Just a little trick and a test. So I'm going to show you a picture. We sift our potting soil together. They're making breakfast mix here. They have peat moss and the black cinder sand. And we use a screen to mix it just because if any of you guys are bakers, you know how they tell you to put all your ingredients in a sifter and mix it together. It mixes it really evenly. That's the main reason. The other reason is because it does catch a large debris. Sometimes the rocks and the cinder sand are a little big. Sometimes there's peat moss chunks that don't break down. We will do this with compost. So when we made the potting soil with compost, we sifted it as well, because we take out all those big chunks of wood that come with compost. We're removing all the big debris because, remember, we're working with tiny seeds. We're trying to give them the best possible source. So we do a lot of things to help them along. So this is how I learned it. You don't have to do it this way, but there's a reason why, and I'll talk to you about why that is. We will germinate our seeds in something we call muffin tins. That was just a name we came up for this little container. So when you hear me say muffin tins, it's really just a little 3x3 container. The depth is like 2 1/4 inches. It's really small. So we are going to start our seeds until each plant has their cotyledons. And you can see the cotyledons. They're really, really big right here. This helps with space, soil, and water. I only need this little 3x3 muffin tin of soil, a little bit of water tin. I have my seeds. I have a little dibbler. You don't really need one, but I use one because I do a lot. I have my label, magenta lettuce, my date on the other side. This is my Sharpie. This is my fork. And here's my potting soil. So I filled this potting soil up to a point, and then I just stamp it down. That allows a little bit of fill, and then I'll just add some more potting soil. I want to overfill my pot just a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to take my label, and I'm going to just make 2 grooves. You can make 4 grooves, you can make 3 or 2. Some people don't make grooves, they just throw it all on top and put potting soil on top of that, but I prefer grooves because it helps you get them out easier at the next step. So now I'm just going to drop my seeds in here. I think I have 5 in there, and I have 6 on this side that fell off. One of you guys who did not get your transplants, this is for you. This will be yours when they come up in about a week. Then I take just more potting soil. All I'm going to do is just cover in that little groove I made. And I'm not going to pack it down. I'm just covering it. And that's all we do. Just going to make sure that nothing's falling off the edge. Get my transplant and my label, and I'm going to stick it in there. That's what it looks like. Now, if I didn't have a no-hole tray, I would use old mushroom baskets. This came from a bakery, from baked goods. There's a whole bunch of good stuff we can use. I'm going to use the smaller one. And remember, we put it inside a container to water. It's a little small. So I have a thing of water here and it's warm. Remember, we're going to use warm water. Oh, that container's not great because I can barely get it in and out. So I'm going to pour the water into the container. I'm not pouring it in here. I'm pouring it into the container. Then I'm going to let this sit in there. Oh, there's a lot of water. It's actually half. What's going to happen is the soil is going to leach up the water from the bottom. It's going to wick it up. And it's just going to take in as much water as it can hold. And then when I'm going to check it in a few hours, if there's still standing water in there, let's say it's been sitting now for 6 hours and there's still standing water in there, I'm going to take this back out. I'm going to dump out some of the water, all the water, and then put it back in. And I'm going to let it sit here like this and just let it do its thing. If we have a warming tray, we can use a warming tray. They sell these. These are about 35 bucks. You put them underneath on the table and this sits on top. What this does is it warms up that soil. You can put it next to your radiator, your heater, wherever it's warm, put it in the sun. All that will start to warm all this up, and we have now just started the germination process. I'm going to pour the water back in because it wasn't finished watering. And I'm just going to let this sit here. So if you have a big tray, you will do this and use your tray, but you can use a whole bunch of recycled things. Remember, this had some kind of muffins in there. These have mushrooms. There's just a bunch of things you can use. So you see how easy that was? You guys can all try one of those. We gave you, if you're local to us, we gave you some muffin tins. We'll deliver more. And we will, we also gave you some chili seeds if you're local, a combination. You can try those now. So remember, all we're doing is we're germinating to this point. So that's really the first step. We're just germinating the seeds. We're just starting them from the very beginning. And that takes about a week for lettuce. It takes two and a half weeks for chili. The more you do this, you're going to learn all the different seeds have their own timing. That is why we write those dates down. And that's why we're going to write those dates in our journals as well. Because once you start doing this, you're going to be able to tell you, oh yeah, I need to start my seeds, it's going to take this long for me to germinate them. Or you're going to get to know these seeds really, really well. The second step, we've only done the first step. 2 weeks later, guess what starts to happen? Our cotyledons have come up. Look how pretty these little cotyledons are. They are so nice. And after the cotyledons come up, guess what starts to happen? Our first set of true leaves are starting to form. Look how beautiful those are. I just love watching these new plants grow up. So the first true leaves tells us if we are starting them in a muffin tin, we're going to have to move them to a new space. Now, some of you might have just started them already in a bigger pot, and that's okay. If you've already started them in a bigger pot, then they don't have to move them. But I have chosen to do it this way, and these are all little muffin tins, so I'm going to move them to their own spot. And this little first true leaf visual is telling me it's time to do that. This is spinach. Look how beautiful and long the cotyledons of spinach are. They're really, really long, and there's the hull of the leaf, of the seed. And they are now telling me, look, I'm growing up. I need more of my own food. This one hasn't had their true leaves yet, so it's still using energy from the seed and food from the seed itself. This is telling me it needs more food. So now, if you're doing it my way and using it my potting soil, I'm going to have to make a move. The time to move plants to a new pot is when the plant's first true leaves appear. These are not the cotyledons. The true leaves are what the plant produces from this point forward. At this point, the plant has used up all its own resources and it needs more support. So what does that mean? It means it needs potting soil with nutrients, water, of course, sunlight, definitely needs light, and continued warm temperatures. So what are the things I need to do? Baby transplants, I need them showing their first true leaves. We need water that may be warmed. You can add liquid fertilizer if you want, but your potting soil should do the trick. I need a location because now I'm going to move them. I mean, they still need to be warm, still need to be safe. They need sunlight. Now is when I'm going to use a dibbler. You can use your fingers, but I use a dibbler. That's this little thing to make holes. And I need my containers. This is when you can move it into a container like a milk carton, or you can move it into like the things we think what you usually see, which is a 6-pack of where we put all our plants in a little 6-pack. The potting soil for me has changed. Now I'm going to make something called a lunch mix, and it's freshly made, it's sterile, and it's warm. Remember, we're doing some of the same things over again. So this is a picture of my mother. We took a class together, and this is what we learned. New containers. We're planting in a little bit larger space because we want those roots to develop, and this allows for a bigger plant. And the most common thing we see is the 6-pack. See her with her little fork? I'm telling you, the plastic fork is an amazing tool. You're really wondering why we gave you a plastic fork. So potting soil is really, really key at this point. Remember, your plant needs nutrients. It's used up all its own stores. So your potting soil needs to have nutrients. And when we learn to make potting soil, usually it already comes with an ingredient with nutrients in it. So when you buy potting soil or you're making it homemade, compost is usually that added nutrient. That's the stuff that has all the nutrients in it, and it's usually a part of the ingredient of your potting soil. So you can, like I said earlier, you can begin to water with any liquid fertilizer if you wish, but it's not really necessary if your potting soil is good. Or you can water maybe once or twice with some liquid fertilizer if you want to. Remember, that's an added thing, an added expense. So just reminding you that that's just something else to consider. So let's talk about what lunch mix is for us. It's a DIY potting soil. I learned it from Ashoka Gardens again. She was a big part of my learning and growing life. And it's 1 part breakfast mix. Remember, we already used breakfast for the beginning part, and that breakfast is half peat moss and half cinder sand. 1 part compost, and we sifted that compost, especially if you purchase it. There's a lot of wood chips, big wood chips, so we're going to take all those out. And 1 part of any dirt from your backyard. And I want to show this picture. This is our AmeriCorps member, Jessica. She's got a part. A part is anything. You decide what a part is. It could be 1 cup. I think this is a quart container. Whatever your part is, it's the same thing. So we decided to use this container. We were making potting soil before. And so when we say a part breakfast mix, we're going to fill this container up with breakfast mix. We're going to fill this container up with sifted compost. And then we're going to fill the 3rd container up with backyard dirt. And we're going to dump that all into a sifter and sift that together. And then we moisten it with warm water. So if you look at if you're local and you got some of our supplies, feel the difference between the breakfast and the lunch. You'll be able to see the difference and feel the difference. But when we're getting ready to plant and transfer these, we need to have our potting soil ready. We're going to moisten it with warm water, and then we're going to use the finger hold test again and make sure that it's moist enough for us to work with. So once again, here is the step-by-step, and then we'll show you how to do it. We're going to transplant to a larger container. So we're going to lay out our newspaper on the table. We're going to make labels if we need it. We're going to fill our 6 packs with soil. We do not pack down again. I mean, we're not going to push it down. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to fill it, tamp it down once, and just fill it, and then kind of scrape off the top so it's level. We're going to make holes in each compartment. We're going to remove the seedlings from the muffin tin, and we're going to use our plastic fork to help separate out each plant by the root. We're going to hold the plant by its leaves, not the stems, and we'll put the plant in the hole, roots first, and then filling it with soil. Then we're going to place our 6-pack in a container and fill the container with warm water. So it's very similar to what we did, and this time I videotaped what we're doing. So we filled up our muffin tins. I got my dibbler and I filled the holes, and now I took the transplants out of the little muffin tin over here, and it's sitting here, and I'm going to play this for you. I couldn't find my plastic fork, so I had to use a real fork. But I just took, you see the roots come out? and I'm just putting it into the hole, and I fill up the hole, and there's one little lettuce plant. It seems crazy when you think, if you've never done this before, but it's really, really, these plants are so forgiving. We're messing up their roots, we're separating them out, we're grabbing them by their head, and they just like, okay. But they may look a little bit stressed after a day, but they come right back. They're really quite forgiving. Here's another video. I'm actually using a knife to cut away from the rows. You can see those roots come out. We want to keep as much of those roots as we possibly can. And I'm going to try and make sure all those roots get into the hole. Your soil cannot be too wet in a muffin tin when you do this. When it's too wet, they kind of stick together. So we want to, this is right before the next watering. That's when I'm going to do this. The soil starts to dry out a little bit. Look at this, there's two stuck next to each other. Remember, I'm holding them by their leaves. And that little corner just made filled up a 6-pack. And I make sure I put my label in there. And we're done. So if we were doing this class in person, we would have all these babies and you guys would come and help do it. We'd have everything ready. You'd make your own potting soil. That's how we've done it in the past. So there's going to be some problems. How many of you have started them and failed? Me. How many of you have started and failed still? Me. I still don't think I'm very good at this, but I'm getting better every year. So we're always going to experience problems, and that's how we learn, right? That's how we get better. So some of the problems we might have are some of our seeds didn't germinate. My muffin tin's been sitting there and nothing's come up. What happened? Or they died after they started growing. What happened? Maybe they got dried out and wilted. You kind of know the answer to that one. Maybe they got eaten by something. That's happened to me. They become really leggy. I think you know what I mean when I say that. Or they just fall over. They were fine like this morning, and today they've just fallen over, and but they're still green. You know, I know you've seen some of these if you've done this before. So I'm just going to introduce a few of these issues, and then we'll talk about this at our part 2. More about it at our part 2. So when the seeds didn't germinate, what happened? Sometimes the seed is old. We don't really know how old that seed was, but we just tried it anyway, and it just never grew. Maybe that seed coat was already compromised and the seed is no longer viable. It was already dead to begin with, maybe. The plant dried out. Remember, our muffin tin the soil in the muffin tin or wherever you're growing them, they need to stay moist. They really need to stay moist. So if they are allowed to dry out, they might have germinated and then dried out and then they died. Something ate my plant, and a bunch of them came up really nice, and one of them didn't come up. And I knew the seed wasn't old because they were really new seed, good seed. So I wasn't sure what happened. I just left it for another week. I finally dumped the dirt out, and there was a grub inside my soil. And I just fed the grub some really nice seedlings. So sometimes, you know, things get in there. When I probably collected my dirt from outside, I captured it. I'm guessing I didn't see it, but it was in there. It ate it. Leggy. When your transplants are leggy, they mean they've got a really long stem and no other leaves, but maybe their cotyledons are the first 2, but they're really, really leggy. That plant is telling you, I need more sun. It's not getting enough sunlight. So think about the bottom of a forest floor on a rainforest. The largest plants, they all reach up and they create a big canopy and they get the most sun. Everything underneath is struggling to get what little sun is left. So they have all these different ways that they try to find sun. Some of them vine, but usually the long leggy, it's telling me, I need more sun. So you might see these leggy plants when they're in front of a window. You're like, but they're in front of my south-facing window. Why are they still leggy? Guess what? They're not getting enough UV light. The window maybe has a UV filter and it's getting sunlight all day long. It's getting warmth, but it's not getting the UV light. So this is when we have to pay attention to kind of those little nuances of our household. This is a big problem. It's happened to me yesterday. It's called dampening off. When you see a beautiful long or beautiful plant and all of a sudden it looks like somebody pinched it and it just falled over. You're like, wait, what happened? Did you pinch my plants? It really does look like somebody did that. That's the characteristic of something called dampening off. And this is caused by a soil-borne fungus. So fungus can invade your soil when we have the right conditions for that fungus. So what can you do? This is why you have to make sure, first of all, your containers are clean and sterile. If you don't sanitize, reuse, and don't wash them, you're just creating an environment for bacteria and fungus to grow in your soil. We don't overwater. This fungus likes to live in very wet soil. So if you leave it sitting in standing water for too long, then you know you're just creating a really good environment for that fungus to develop. So remember, we're always going to drain any standing water and then let our plant drain itself into a bin. So try not to have soggy soil. Watering is key for this. Have good air circulation. If we put things in a dome, it's nice to have it in a covered dome or a plastic bag to create some moisture and heat. But sometimes that can breed some of this fungi. So making sure that there's enough room, turn a ceiling fan on to move the air around. Maintain proper heating. This is the hard part. This fungus actually likes to grow in temperatures less than 50 degrees. When it's wet, when it's below 50, that's when it starts to grow. So if you're seeing, this characteristic in your plants, then you said, okay, I need to warm up the air in a little bit. And then thin transplants when you should. Don't leave them sitting too long because that just creates more, more chance for it to grow. So these are just some things we're going to think about. This sifter that I was using was made to dry out our corn. And it works. And I need a sifter, so I started using it. If you want to make your own sifter at home, you need 1/8 inch square hardware cloth. That's the actual sifter part. And then you're going to make the frame if you want to make your own. I wanted to show this to you because I didn't get to show this on the video. When we're removing these from our muffin tin, and I wanted to show you how to do that. So I like to plant in rows because if you look, there's one row here. This is one row. There's a second row here. And it looks like there was a third row, but they didn't all come up. There's only one little one. So when I'm going to remove my plants from the muffin tin, I like to use rows because it's just it provides just enough room for my fingers to get in there. So what I'll do is I'll grab this. I'm not putting my fingers on top of any plants. I'm going to turn it over, tap the back, and out come the whole plant. There's still enough moisture in here to keep it, but it's the roots. You see the baby roots? That's what's holding it together. I'll turn it around, and there's my muffin tin. And so when I'm not ready to transplant here. I should have got one ready. What I'll do is then grab one of these. This is one that's already on the corner, and I'll just start pulling it apart. When we pull off a transplant like this and we see all that potting soil connected to the roots, that's a really, really good sign. There are many, many minuscule roots in this root system. And when we see them holding that soil, that's a really good indication you have a healthy plant. So we're going to take this and then move that into the 6-pack. I'm so happy to see you all with your children. This is how they learn, and this is really something we can all do together. Continue to grow. Bye, everyone. Have a good day.